So today we're doing bangers only. And I'm really grateful because if you've ever emailed back and forth with me, then you know that in my signature is a quote from a UU minister saying that Blue Boat Home is basically the Freebird of Unitarian Universalism. So I'm relieved that we agree about that, right? Like we need lighters to, we're lit like a chalice, friends. And you know, the spirit of mystery and wonder that lives inside of us is always looking for things that are beautiful and true. And when it finds them, it notices. So that is the spirit in which I share this story with you today. It is called The Stuff of Stars. I like it. In the dark, in the dark, in the deep, deep dark, a speck floated, invisible as thought, weighty as God. There was yet no time. There was yet no space. No up, no down, no edge, no center. No earth with soaring hawks, scuttling beetles, trees reaching for the sky. There was no sky. No you, no me, only the speck, waiting, waiting. No owls. And then, at the beginning of all beginnings, something went bang. And Sarah pressed the wrong button on the remote control. And in a trillionth of a second, our universe was born. A cloud of gas unfolded, unfurled, zigged, zagged, stretched, collided, expanded, expanded, expanded. Bits bumped, gathered, fused, and throughout the cosmos, stars caught fire. Trillions of stars, but still no planets to attend those stars. And if no planets, then no oceans, no mountains, no hippopotami, no violets blooming in a shady wood, no crickets singing to the night, no day, no night. The stars burned and burned. They burned so long and so hot that some of them exploded, flinging stardust everywhere. And the ash of those dying stars gathered into planets, and the planets circled other stars, but still no bluebirds, no butterflies, still no snails, no giraffes, still no you, no me. The planets closest to their star stayed very hot. The ones far away grew very cold. But one lucky planet, a fragile blue ball we call Earth, was neither too far nor too near. It circled its yellow star, the one we call the sun, from just the right distance and with just the right tilt to be sometimes warm, sometimes cool. Perfect for turning that starry stuff into mitochondria, jellyfish, spiders, into ferns and sharks, into daisies and galloping horses, and yes, even owls. Again and again, stardust gave birth to stardust. Dinosaurs lived and died, making room for humans. Our great-great-great-grandparents and all before them lived and died, making room for more and more children. Then, one day, in the dark, in the dark, in the deep, deep dark, another speck floated, invisible as dreams, special as love, waiting, waiting, dividing, changing, growing, until at last you burst into the world. You took a big breath of the same air once breathed by woolly mammoths. You cried tears that were once salty seas. Your hair, once the carbon in a leaf. You and the velvet moss, the caterpillars, the lions, you and the singing whales, the larks, the frogs, the owls. You and me, loving you, all of us, the stuff of stars. And I hope I will see some of you after service today in our RE feedback meeting. We have food, we have games, we have prize boxes. But for now, you can sing your way out to your RE small group, and I I'm going to stay in here. So when you get out, look for Shelby and Tom.
May your mind be open to new learning. May your lips bring truth into the world. May your heart know love and your hands do the work of justice as you go your way in peace. As you go your way in peace. May your mind be open to new learning. Your lips bring truth into the world. May your heart know love and your hands do the work of justice. You go your way in peace. As you go your way in peace.
It's kind of fun to see what that looks like from this angle. Got to get this to fun size height here. Hello again. A couple of weeks ago, I was at a church event and one of our elementary schoolers gave me a hug. If you saw this and you know who it is, be cool. Don't out them, because I have been working for 3 years to earn the trust that kid expressed in that moment. And it is not easy to do. Y'all know how our UU kids are. We raise disruptors. We're proud of it, but sometimes they practice on us. They say, what's this norm over here? Does it bother you when I touch that? Don't you think that's interesting? That's so interesting. And sometimes interesting is not quite the right word. If you have a sacred cow, they have a sudden craving for hamburgers. They would also like to talk to you about the irrationality of calling something made out of beef a hamburger. Come on, it's a thinker, right? We offer them unfettered religious freedom, and at every youth event I've ever hosted, somebody starts a cult. It's really kind of the only way to be transgressive if you're a UU kid, right? Often they also host the queerest mock wedding that they can imagine. Our middle school volunteers have heard the same line from me so many times that it's at risk of becoming a meme. Middle schoolers' job on a developmental level is to break the session plan. So, when I asked them what theology they wanted to explore this year in our UU Inspirations program, it is perhaps unsurprising that they immediately suggested satirical religions with devilish smiles on their faces. And I was delighted, because that particular subject seemed likely to lead to, some meta-analysis. But it didn't quite go where I expected, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. So I've been listening to a podcast lately called Sold a Story. Has anybody heard this podcast? It's really cool. Okay, a few of us, yeah. Not unsurprisingly, the teachers have heard of it. It's about the pendulum swing between popular schools of thought when it comes to reading instruction in the US. And any teacher can tell you that just as you, as an American voter, can hear the words like climate change and immediately associate that with progressive politics, or America First and immediately associate that with conservatism, we know which educational theories belong in which camp. Problem solving, left. Math fact memorization and drill, right. Whole language, left. Phonics, right. So I've been really fascinated by this podcast because I already think about this pendulum swing a lot. I did my teacher training in Ohio, which was the epicenter of whole language in the United States, at precisely the moment that it was on the rise. And if you're unfamiliar with whole language, it involves a lot of cueing of students and use of context clues to guess unknown words. Phonics instruction is, for the most part, absent from whole language programs. And what we've now learned by studying soldiers who lost their reading ability after suffering a traumatic brain injury is that phonics instruction is actually really crucial neurologically to reading and reading acquisition. But long after we had that information, we were still leaning into whole language models. And the podcast is kind of about the reasons for and the consequences of that decision. Most of the series addresses the two learning theories in a very binary way, right? Phonics is correct, whole language is wrong. And even as I was very interested, I was also getting annoyed, because it wasn't until episode 10 that a science of reading expert finally said, but we're not saying to just do phonics. Goodness, no. Kids need awesome classroom libraries and time to read. Some of their learning is contextual and applied. And like, even as I share this with you, I want to gently bang my head on the pulpit, right? Because this understanding, of course, is where whole language came from. People who had been through generations of like Dick and Jane readers, right? Like really phonics heavy readers, and those were the books that were in the classroom and kids found them boring and like kind of twee. Like those educators advocated for more contextual applied learning. But in the process, they dropped phonics. Now we've learned that phonics is definitely super important, and we're already having to caution people not to drop cozy reading nooks and contextual learning. So it's not even a pendulum, man, like it's a circle. And unsurprisingly, our science-loving UU congregations have done the same darn thing. Earlier in our religious history, our RE programs tended to lean heavily on the theories of Jean Piaget, who saw children as like little scientists who went through specific learning stages, and they did it in a specific order, and it was a very individualistic process. And as a result, we had very schooly, grade-level grouped classrooms, right? Today, UUs tend to prefer Vygotsky, and we talk about the congregation as our learning community, and we take a constructivist approach to religious education. We like to keep things open-ended, and we like kids to be able to build their own theology and make their own choices, and this is why you'll sometimes hear us calling it religious exploration nowadays. But this has also led to a very troubling criticism about UURE from inside the program. You've probably heard it phrased a couple of different ways. We just believe whatever we want, or that place is a church about nothing. I think a lot of UU parents have heard this criticism from their own youth and young adult children. And I think our interpretation of a constructivist approach to RE is where this negativity is coming from. Generally speaking, children and adolescents need multiple concrete models, perspectives, and lessons to compare. Open exploratory space matters, but like mostly once you've been exposed to enough ideas that you actually have something to ponder. UUs tend to do a lot of like workshop-y, play-based, sensory-rich stuff in RE, and sometimes it's not easy for kids to differentiate that from any other after-school extracurricular. A totally unstructured approach can feel very freeing to adults, but when kids don't have enough theological sand in the sandbox, they're not going to build a sandcastle, right? So they end up defaulting to whatever community norm they can perceive from being around us, or they kind of develop this shrugging relativism, like it's all basically the same thing, or they just sort of drift because there's not any friction against which to clarify their own values. This is why they're starting cults at youth events, right? Because it's really literally the only way to push back. So I want to go back for just a second to that part about defaulting to a perceived community norm. That is a big concern, because one outcome of this trend of providing a sensory-rich environment with lots of unstructured time is that when religion does come up, kids mostly hear off-the-cuff sound bites as we chat with other adults, or their questions catch us off guard and they get like our lizard brain reaction instead of what we would have said, right, if we'd been speaking from our highest self. We even become kind of avoidant of speaking about faith and theology, like at a church. That's kind of wild. But we've developed a hypersensitivity to talking about these things in an intentional way because so many of us have had bad experiences with proselytization. Many of us arrive here as adults, fleeing from past trauma at the hands of dysfunctional faith communities. And this is where religious education has some real parallels to OWL. OWL, if you are new to our congregation, is a lifespan sexual health and wellness program that's award-winning, that we've been running for decades and running really well. And a lot of us did not grow up with inclusive, accurate sexual health and wellness education. So give me a sign if you've ever been a parent in an OWL parent orientation. Anybody? Yeah. Okay, so we get in there and we figure out real quick that we have some serious baggage and like maybe some misinformation. So we make a shared commitment not to pass that down to our kids. We have zero fear of direct instruction in OWL because we realize that there's a base level of accurate information that every kid needs in order to make their own decisions. Our goal in religious education should be the same: to recognize that there may be areas where we will understandably struggle to give even-handed treatment to different ways of believing. Because, let's be honest, it's very difficult to separate what's theoretically a liberatory belief from the way that it's been warped by communities that we might have been a part of. And those of us who have always been here face different problems. Unitarian Universalism has also gone through a big pendulum swing in the past 50 years or so. How many of you experienced a lifelong UU kind of looking down their nose at you and saying, this is a historically Christian denomination? Anybody? Yeah, it doesn't happen very much anymore, but when I came in the 90s, it did happen, and it happened quite a bit. And it has played out in weird ways in our RE curricula. So, for example, before this last Article 2 revision, our sources of inspiration talked about Judeo-Christian heritage and world religions, right? Though we know that Islam, Judaism, and Christianity are all Abrahamic faiths, and they have shared scriptures, right? The Spirit Play program has multi-part stories about the life of Muhammad, the life of Buddha, the Ramayana, and then these weird disjointed anecdotes about the life of Jesus. And that's because when they first started implementing that program, Jesus was still considered the default, even in UU congregations. It was kind of like everybody knows, right? But in this day and age, UUs are more likely to poo-poo any kind of theism in favor of secular humanism. And our kids don't have any sandbox sand about the differences between Christianity and Judaism, the life of Jesus, how these three Abrahamic faiths fit together, where they overlap and where they don't know. So we have to give them that sand, not just for their own meaning making, but for the sake of cultural literacy. And this brings me back to the middle schoolers and their sessions on satirical religion. This is a curricula I wrote for them, and I actually do that a lot, either create or edit curricula, because up-to-date UURE programs are very thin on the ground right now. And we had the National Tapestry of Faith program, and people kind of quit updating it, and then they sunsetted it, and nothing new exists yet, so yeah. And the thing that started to stand out as we looked at, for example, the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. Has anybody ever heard of this? Yeah, I'm seeing all these nodding heads all of a sudden. And is that satirical religions, they're not actually making fun of faith, right? What they're actually poking fun at is the inability to sit with faith. Faith is not something we can prove. And sitting with that uncertainty can be profoundly uncomfortable. And there's safety in numbers, right? So some people try to handle their uncomfortable feelings by trying to force belief. So we started with flying spaghetti monsters and other really silly things, but look how quickly that got deep. We went straight to an issue that is at the core of our UU history, which is our refusal to have belief imposed on us. That is maybe our most essential quality. When we allow even the dominant theological culture of our generation of UUs to truncate search, we're contradicting that heritage, and our kids see that. So we cannot share the lizard brain opinion. We have to share the higher self opinion. Not only do they hear our biases, but they also come to the conclusion that the reason that we've kind of left them in this open-ended model to recreate 2,000 years of human religious history out of whole cloth is because we don't actually know that much ourselves. They think we're spiritual dilettantes. We talk about search, but from their perspective, if they can't see the evidence that we're actually doing it, then we're basically the religious equivalent of having the entire internet at our disposal and using it to watch cat videos. Right? So while we're tangled up in our hang-ups about our children maybe adopting faith in a higher power, we completely miss the fact that they are losing faith in us. I have seen this disillusionment play out so many times in the past 30 years. Heard kids say that we're actually just a woke people club or a church about nothing. Or they come to RE and tell us that some kid on the bus said these things and they had no rebuttal, and that made them feel embarrassed. That is a watershed moment for a lot of UU kids. So I've used the word faith a lot over the last few minutes, and I imagine that's making some people uncomfortable. So let me share some of the faith statements we discussed in the middle school group when we moved from figuring out what faith is not, provable, to what faith actually is, something we commit and recommit to in spite of all the dependencies involved. People are basically good. The truth will come out in the end. Democracy works. Justice will prevail. Our community can get through this crisis. Science can solve big problems. The universe has inherent order. Activities like this make it visible to the kids that some of our church groups that look like clubs that could happen anywhere have a much deeper grounding here at UUI. Not all faith is theistic, but we are people of faith. We are a church about so many somethings. Our kids are smart. Their questions are just as big as ours. So we can't run a program on vibes and leave them fumbling in the dark. We need to put our search where they can see it. Maybe some of you are familiar with the term apologetics, the formal, reasoned defense of your worldview. When we engage with apologetics, we revisit our beliefs periodically, and we integrate them with new information as we receive it. In a religion with a creed and scriptures, we'd be defending the validity of those scriptures. In a UU context, one of the main things we have to square is that revelation is not sealed. We never, in our entire lives, get to put a period on the end of the sentence of our theology. We choose in every moment to be open to possibility. So, moving from that foundation, with humility for the vastness of the universe, there is a foundation of basic knowledge, religious civics, if you will, that we have a responsibility to share with the kids so that they actually have the enriched environment that a constructed faith requires. And we need to make sure our implicit culture, what our kids are soaking in, makes our search visible without inhibiting theirs. And as we guard against theological binaries, we also need to guard against the false binary that you can have learning or you can have fun. The two are not mutually exclusive. So I'm excited about that end of year feedback meeting today, where we're going to use games to elicit deeper responses to our program that we'll use for developing next year's program, right? And one of our lessons on satirical religions involved, of course, a cult whose holy object was a banana, which our volunteers were instructed to eat at the end of the session without comment or explanation. And if you think back to our Words for All Ages this morning, you can see all the pedagogical work that it did while also being beautiful and engaging. We are a wonderful prophetic faith. So when it comes to our children's religious exploration, let's not let nothing stand in our way. Thank you.